One. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Talking Landscape Photography. Luke and I actually are still alive, believe it or not. Luke, he can speak for himself, but he's been very busy being and foster the education, understanding, and respect for the living relationship of the Indigenous people with Takana. And that was funded by the Bob Brown Foundation, where they flew Luke and Andrew and I out to a remote part of the west coast of Tasmania with a couple of Aboriginal elders, and we were there for 4 days. And it's quite a powerful, beautiful story, so I'm excited about that. And also planning a few trips next year, Iceland and Svalbard again. And I'm actually looking at the Empty Quarter and Pakistan actually as well. And I've got one in Southwest WA, another one in Broome and Derby, and winter one in New Zealand. So I've been pretty quiet the last couple of months, doing a little bit of aurora chasing here and there, and just having a bit of a quiet patch after a busy middle of the year. How you going, Lucky?
Oh, well, let's say it's been a little bit quieter on my front. I was thinking about my plans for next year, and decidedly a little bit quieter than yours. After having little Theo come along a couple of months ago, almost 3 months ago now. It's amazing how time flies. So yeah, it's been a pretty amazing little adventure in its own right, and I've had a few little trips here and there, but obviously can't get away as much these days. And it's just really lovely to be back and be able to talk about photography and sort of immerse myself in different worlds again. And I'm really looking forward to tonight's show because I know how much effort's been put into the amount of content that's been put together by Rob and the passion that lies there underneath. And for me, just seeing passion in other people and their kind of commitment to different causes and what they believe in and using their skills to help drive that is what inspiration's all about, really. So really looking forward to tonight's show.
Yeah, so speaking of which, we've had Rob on the show before, Mr. Rob Lakers, one of my neighbours extraordinaire. I'm still waiting for that come by for coffee visit, Rob. One day, he's always too busy. But he's busy with great purpose. So Rob, in my mind, is initially, and he's one of the foremost and preeminent wilderness photographers in this country, if not this part of the world. But more so than that, he's a fierce conservationist and advocate for both, Indigenous, historical, and wildlife, and ecological, and biodiversity, and he has a way of focusing the purpose of his photographic skills like almost no one I've ever met, and being very unapologetically fierce about it, and very smart and clever and well educated about how best it can be put to use. And we have a wonderful history of that in Tasmania in particular that Luke and I are very proud to sort of be on the tail end of a little bit. But I feel like as much as anyone alive, certainly in Tasmania, Rob's at the forefront of it. And if I've ever got any question about what's happening politically or what's being threatened, the first person I go to is Rob, and he's already 10 steps ahead of everybody else. And tonight's show is a little bit more about that principle and how we may hopefully get inspired a little bit personally by being mindful of how somebody with, Rob's sort of passion and skill set applies himself, but also how that may foray into our own lives, in our own communities, and the kind of things that we feel like we may be able to advocate for. Hopefully, we'll get a little bit of extra inspiration from Rob. So, Rob, I'll let you advocate the whole project and share it through the lens that you're comfortable sharing, and I'll leave it to completely up to you.
Okay, so thank you for the invitation, both. And like as we discussed, this show is going to be devoted to Robbins Island, which is uh, it's an island off the northwest coast of Tasmania. It's about 12. It's roughly a blob, about 12 to 13 kilometers north to south and east to west, not quite as much east to west. The island is completely privately owned down to high tide mark. And about a third of it, or no less than a third, is cattle operation. But there's still substantial areas of native vegetation. And around the rim of the island, uh, lying as it is in the northwest corner of Bass Strait, it's an incredible shorebird habitat. So it's Tasmania's most important shorebird site. It hosts more shorebirds there than the rest of Tasmania combined, shorebirds and waterbirds. Additional to that, it's on the migratory path of the orange-bellied parrot when it's coming up from Melaleuca on its return route back to Victoria and South Australia and into New South Wales. The orange-bellied parrots and blue-winged parrots track through Robbins Island and that whole northwest corner of Tasmania. Additional to that again, it's the only natural remaining buffered island for disease-free Tasmanian devils. So currently there's no Tasmanian devil facial tumour extant on the island. And because it's like offshore, it's about a kilometre wide passage, which is inundated each high tide or each mid and high tide. That devil population has maintained its disease-free status, even though across on the mainland of Tasmania, Tasmanian devils have been decimated. Absolutely, the population has collapsed in recent year or two because of the facial tumour. So it's really important to maintain that devil-free status, and it's really important that that island is maintained as an incredible shorebird site. Like the island itself is 12 k's either way, but then it's surrounded at low tide by very extensive mud flats and sand flats, and that's where the shorebirds feed and forage. And then twice a day at both high tides, as the tide's coming in, the shorebirds don't just sort of walk up the beach and sort of huddle on at the top of the beach there. They actually commute to very specific sites. There's 5 or 6 of them on the island or just adjacent to the island on smaller offshore islands. And twice a day at every single high tide, all of the shorebirds move to those specific sites. So it's an incredible amount of movement of the shorebirds around and across the island to get from the low tide foraging sites to the high tide roosting sites. Additional to that, in inclement, in bad weather, like it's stuck in the middle of Bass Strait and you've got the front sweeping through, and the bird movements will be influenced by the weather patterns as well as the tides and the feeding and roosting requirements. So it's a very dynamic bird population. It is proposed as a major wind farm with 100 turbines, each a couple of hundred metres tall. That's 3 times the height of Rest Point Casino in Hobart. Oh, wow. And whilst a swift transition to renewable energy is absolutely essential, we need to have a secondary level of discrimination, and that is to look at where we are siting wind and solar farms, etc., as any project. And I've been fairly intensively involved in Robbins Island and around the issue of the proposed wind farm for the last 6 months or so. And I've spoken to a large number of ecologists, and every single ecologist that I've spoken to says that categorically this is the worst location for a wind farm in Tasmania. It's not as if it's just a bad location, it's the worst, simply because it's such an important shorebird area. And so that's, bolstered my own experience over 4 or 5 years of visiting the island, photographing shorebirds, that, we need to be more discerning in where we place any projects, including renewable energy projects. And it's not counterintuitive for an environmentalist to oppose the siting of a renewable energy project. One just has to go back to the Gordon Blow Franklin. Yeah. There were many environmentalists, fiercely opposing that. And like there are other ways for us to make our energy transition rather than jeopardizing high biodiversity areas. So that's where I've come into it. And as I said, I've spent 4 or 5 years, probably a couple of months in total on and around the island, photographing and observing the shorebird life particularly. And it's just quite extraordinary. There's nowhere else in Tassie like it, particularly at certain times of the year pre-migration, because many of these birds migrate to the Northern Hemisphere, to Siberia, in our autumn, March and early April, and then they'll fly off to Siberia and across to Alaska. They'll very rapidly mate and breed in that location. Then they'll return 6 months later. So they come back to Tassie. They come back to the Southern Hemisphere, including Tassie, in September, October. So right now it's late November. There'd be masses of shorebirds there, but they're at their peak at the departure time in through March and then into early April. Shorebirds from across Tasmania funnel through those northwest islands. They probably do the same through the northeast, the Furneaux group as well. But it's then that you get really high concentrations of shorebirds. And the other amazing thing is that at that time, they're in their pre-breeding plumage. So they, like many of the birds through summer, they're sort of greys and dull browns and so on. And then their color changes dramatically prior to their breeding time. And even though they're breeding in Alaska and Siberia, their color is changing while they're here still in Tasmania. And so you get vibrant reds, particularly in many of the birds. And it's just, dramatic scenes and, extraordinary to photograph, a real joy. You feel like you're in the midst of this great natural phenomenon of just life thronging around you. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff.
Like you're on the plains of the Serengeti or something.
Even better, I'm sure. It's
Right.
like a short, many of us will have experienced short-tailed shearwater muttonbird migrations around Tassie. They come down, and if you're out on the water, you just get these masses of birds just moving around you and then diving and flying, then diving and floating. And again, just this energy, this life-filled energy. It's just, or dolphins, if you happen to find yourself in a mass of dolphins, these are some of the most extraordinary spectacles on the planet, and they still exist, even though they're much, much diminished from what they would have been, centuries ago and decades ago. They're still there, and to grasp.
So what sort of numbers are we talking about, Rob?
Well, up to 25,000 shorebirds and waterbirds. It's huge numbers of birds, and I've got footage of up to 5,000 birds just on land, all moving around on land, and then flying, and then soaring, and then coming down again. It's like it's dramatic stuff.
Like the Mermation, where they,
it is. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm also I'm aware that these things don't always last, because when I was at uni many, many years ago, I did a project. My final science year project was looking at bogong moths in Kosciuszko National Park. And so I mapped the east of Asian sites. So that's a phenomenon where you had, billions of bogong moths, which through the winter breed up in farming country and sort of Midwest country all the way up into southern Queensland. And then in summer, early summer, they migrate down to Kosciuszko and the Victorian Alps. And there they cluster, they aggregate into the granite rock outcrops. And it's thought they do so to retard their maturation, because if they were laying their eggs and so on in midsummer in those, northern New South Wales and southern Queensland regions, there's no water. The pupae, when they come out, and the larvae wouldn't survive. So they fly to a colder climate, east of 8, over the summer, and then fly back, mate, and lay their eggs and die. It's an annual cycle only. But this gorgeous little moth, about an inch long, little brown moth, is essentially extinct in the wild now. Like, the population crashed through the drought over the last decade or two, through the use of pesticides and through wildfire. And the population is just, virtually on the edge of complete extinction. It's not the sort of thing you can breed up and have a captive breeding program in a lab. And it's, that's just brought home to me in the most tragic way, how populations, which are apparently so robust and numerous, can collapse so quickly. And I fear the same for these migratory shorebirds that now, track through the East Asian, Australasian flyway from the Northern Hemisphere with Tasmania at its southern end. Those populations, 25,000 birds that we see in late summer at Robbins Island, could collapse. Many of those species are threatened. Probably half of the migratory species are threatened. And many, the trend is down, and they're just in free fall, and that trend is not diminishing. So, we can't just let these gorgeous animals and these gorgeous, amazing ancient patterns of life moving around the planet. It's so vulnerable. Migratory species, whether they're insects or birds, just seem to be very vulnerable to our human impacts.
Well,
Mm.
even the kind of, you think of Africa and how much fencing's gone and totally shut down the migratory patterns of so many of the larger creatures and on the earth as well, from our influence. It's sort of, it's occasionally I hear the statistics from a global perspective, and it just each time it sort of sinks a little bit deeper each time in terms of the what is it? It's either 50 or 70% of the world's precious wildlife has been impacted, to a serious extent in the last
Yeah, like
50 years.
basically, like Greenpeace did a survey about a decade ago, and they found that over two-thirds of the wildlife on the planet has disappeared in 30 years. And this is
Oh,
it's almost as if it's a silent elimination, a silent disappearance, because in our normal lives we can ignore it. We're not aware of it. But
yeah.
and again, that trend is not diminishing and is not reducing.
Like I mean, if you actually sit with that commentary, I mean, that's
Awful.
almost unbelievable. Like it's just astonishing. That's two-thirds of the Earth's creatures,
Yeah,
and a less of a blink of an eye from the Earth's history. It's
yeah,
I don't even know how to comprehend where that's heading towards. But it just the other day, I'd actually heard that again, and it just hit me in a way that it never hit me before. Just the reality of it, and that's why it's special. We have people like yourself, Rob, who are willing to put their hand up to be the voice for the voiceless and use their skill sets. And it could be a good conversation to lean into now is how your skill set as an image maker and a videographer translates and how you like to use it to support the causes that you choose to apply it to. And how you think it's most effective, and again, how we can all maybe be a bit more mindful of how we could use our gifts and skills as well.
yeah. I have this concept of high-level skills, and I think that like we are in a critical juncture on the planet, not only for wildlife, obviously, as we've been talking about, but it's also just the human strife on the planet is at levels which are, if not unprecedented. Like the world has always been a terrible place, but it's in front of us now. We can see it now. It's not as if it's off on some other continent that we're unaware of, or else what we can witness is just localized. We can see what's happening across the planet. So, we're at an extraordinary time in Earth's history, and that calls on all of us to rise to the occasion. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, that we should use our high level skills. And that might be, for people like we three or others watching this program, it's going to be photographic skills, but it could be anything. It could be skills, it could be connections with, groups or decision makers. It could be influence in other various ways through your social networks. It could be, you're well resourced financially, or you've got other skills. Um, yeah, it's just a matter of shifting, reorienting, that lovely word, pivoting our skills to be able to use them in a way which is still enjoyable. Like it's not as if photographing threatened wildlife is less enjoyable than photographing non-threatened wildlife, but it's more rewarding in that and it's more meaningful, and that it's actually for a purpose. It's not just showing. Not there's anything wrong with showing how gorgeous these animals or certain landscapes are, but to be able to use that to actually protect those landscapes or that wildlife is, it's very rewarding and fulfilling personally. But it also sort of answers that, what harks back to what we are talking about a couple of minutes ago, like the loss of wildlife on the planet. That can lead to despair. That can lead to inaction through, oh, what can I possibly do? But there is something that we all can do. And again, if you can utilize your high-end skills or build those high-end skills starting now and as you move through your life, um, you know, you can end up being an effective change agent.
Well, yes, that's right, and it's it's just working out what little piece you can contribute, and if everyone just did contribute their little piece, then it's a big, it goes a long, long way. So it
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah,
I always feel like even just with even what we share on social media or how we when we're talking to other people, just yeah, little messages, little bits and pieces can go a very long way, and people don't really know how much impact they can actually have. And you only have to inspire, maybe it's not yourself, but you inspire someone else, and then that just carries it forward as well. So it's definitely a amazing thing you're doing there, Rob, and I'm pretty keen to see some pictures too. Maybe we could pull a
yep.
few things and take a
Okay.
look.
While you're getting those ready, Rob, I think the most incredible example I've seen of how broad and diverse people's gifts and skills can be used for advocacy is a very simple but beautiful project in Tasmania called Apa Takana, which is evolved in its name for a little bit, or take on emotion originally. And I've seen painters and dancers and poets and singers and screen makers and charcoal sketching and playwrights. Like it just really struck me how many different mediums there are to tell a story and to connect with people and to create a bridge of understanding and build connection with wildlife and beautiful landscapes. And it even got me thinking, am I using all the skills that I have as broadly as I think I could? And it's quite lovely to be around, be in a state where there's a lot of active advocacy across such a broad spectrum, because it's just yeah, it's almost like some of the projects that I've done and that Luke and I have done. We deliberately include multimedia, like say in our upcoming exhibition, we're using the photographs, but we're also using the storytelling of video, and we're also using the Palawa language. So there's at least three different mediums or bridges for people to engage with the work, and I think it makes sense to think a little bit wider sometimes. But yeah, keen to see and get a little bit more specific about how you've chosen to use yours on this project, Rob.
I think also just to add what you're saying, netball science, like there's this whole swathe of science, and so much science is, through government priorities, it's not necessarily directed in the most needed directions. And so, but I think there's more and more scope through different NGOs to utilize science as well as arts in, in the direction that it really is most required, rather than sort of more obscure or, less immediately required ends. So it might be best if I've got just a short 2.5 minute film on Robbins Island. And that can perhaps set the scene a bit, and then I could go through a couple of stills as well. So I can get that up, share screen.
Please do, yeah.
There it is. There's that button. Just bear with me. Sorry, that shouldn't happen. That working?
Yes, sir.
Here we go.
Oh, Rob, I don't know. Did you do the optimize? I don't. That is okay.
Let me stop it. Sorry, Luke.
I think it was already going well. It just took a few seconds to warm up.
I'll take it back to the beginning. Can you remind me where that optimize is?
If it catches up on the buffer, then it can. You get halfway through and it starts to go all jittery.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Sorry, Luke. Can you remind me where that?
I was just when you press the green share screen,
Yeah.
and then you can. It just says optimize for
Okay.
video.
No, it is clicked.
Okay, there you go. Jump the gun.
All right, take two. Let's go.
Take two. Sorry about that. Here we go.
Wow. Wow, such a powerful medium, Rob, and so elegantly sort of put together with word and sound and vision at the same time. It's
Yeah, stop sharing. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it just gives you a visual representation of like it's a flat island that is surrounded by this extraordinary, productive um, wetland area for shorebirds and waterbirds.
yeah, like from the air, like look, I've flown over it quite a few times, and I for the style of photography that I do, just purely from an artistic point of view, I think it's the most stunning place on the whole of Tasmania to fly of and around. Now, the channels on the south end of Robbins Island in particular are quite stunning, and they're very, very shallow. So at spring low tide, I think you can even walk across. So it's an unusual area, and I guess that probably alludes to why it's a bit more specialized in terms of the food sources for those particular birds as well. And that's what I don't know quite so much about. What is the ecosystem there that's unique to the place that attracts so many of those birds? And I still can't figure out why birds would choose to fly 7,000 kilometers when they could probably do something else. And they're like this big, and it's like it's unbelievable what they do. I'm like, why do they do it, Rob?
Yeah, I think it's because it's inundated by the water, because it's twice a day by the tides. It's just an extremely productive natural ecosystem. So there's all sorts of mollusks and so on. And it's interesting, you're looking at the different species of birds. They've all got different adaptations to obtain food from different ecological niches. Like there are some with short beaks, there are some with longer beaks. Some of the beaks curve down, some of the beaks curve up. Um, and so they're all probing at different layers in the mud and the sand. And it's just, yeah, it's just an oasis or a haven for them. And so they just live in a perpetual summer. And the cost is that they have to fly, as they say, 7,000 kilometers a year. And again, the redneck stints are about that long, like maybe 10 centimeters long. They fit within your hand. And in their lifetime, they'll fly from here to the moon. Like that's the flight that
Oh my
they'll
God.
undertake.
Wow.
God.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's pretty out there.
Oh, what incredible creatures.
Literally out there.
Must have built some pretty a kind of beautiful relationship with some of them, I guess, some of the different species. Rob, do you have any sort of quiet favorites
Well, I don't know all of the 25,000 by name, but I'm working on it.
Because
Uh,
I looked at some of those names and I thought I have never heard some of those names before. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, like anything you pick, you sort of make an identification with the particular species, and then oh yeah, that one's that one, and then another one, oh yeah, and so you gradually, build up the name repertoire. There's a
have you
couple.
worked with anybody else to build up your personal knowledge of the birds and the species?
There's really good bird apps for identifying birds,
Is
either
that
by
July's
call.
Merlin, is it? Or
Yeah, yeah. There's a bundle of them now. Um, by call, and obviously showing what their pictures are and their habitat and their distribution, so you can narrow it down there. And I ask questions of other people. There's groups, BirdLife Tasmania and other groups, who do birding expeditions for terrestrial birds, but also shorebirds are a favorite because you can see so many and they're so interesting, and you can see their behaviors really clearly. Yeah, you just, like anything, if you're interested, you'll just pick it up as you go. I
immerse
was going to
yourself.
talk. Sorry. I was,
When you immerse yourself, it just happens by osmosis, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. I was going to talk about photographing shorebirds. It attracted me from the outset because you've got a clean background. It's much easier to get a clean background if you're photographing wildlife on land, unless you can have some separation. So you've got a blurred background. If you've got a bird on a twig and there's nothing for 10 meters behind it, fine. But if a bird's just in a bush and it's surrounded by other bits of bush, it's difficult often to get clean compositions. Whereas shorebirds, you're often going to have either water or sand or a dune pattern behind or something like that, and so you can get it lends itself to photography really, really well. Also, um, they're perhaps like they're localized, particularly with these roosting species. They'll come to certain sites twice a day. And if you're there for the daytime period that they come, you can just set yourself up and they'll come, and then they'll be there for an hour or two, and then they'll depart again. And so that's good.
Captive audience.
Sorry?
Captive audience.
Yeah, exactly. You're the captive audience. But the other key thing with shorebirds is that you need to get down low. Like if you look at the footage on there,
It looks like you're lying down for almost all of
you've got
them.
to be on
I
your
was going to
front.
say,
You've
how
got to
dirty your
slither.
tummy gets.
It's excellent core exercise, because you can buy these things called skimmers, which is like a plate with an attachment, and you can, with a tripod base attachment, and you can sort of put your Arca Swiss attachment into it. And so then you've got this plate and a little column, and then your camera with the long lens is balanced on that. And you push that ahead of you as you're slithering forward. Try it. It's extremely good exercise.
It's
When you
like a
haven't done
little,
it for,
like a little skid or something.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
And it just means it
I've
slides
seen
across the
that.
sand, and it slides across the mud, or
They're
whatever.
only they have like a little stand about what 10 centimeters or something like that. Just enough
Yeah,
to.
like it's a normal dinner plate size, but it's got raised edges, so the sand doesn't come into it
Okay.
readily.
And does it you can extend the height a little bit as well? You got a
You
bit of
can put whatever, you don't want it too high, because then you're sort of craning your neck up.
yeah, yeah.
It's
Okay.
normally about, just to come, you can, adjust it with different spaces or whatever, just to get it a comfortable height, so that your eye's not right down on the sand, but it's still at a low angle. So it does two things. One, it gives you a really good bird's eye level for photographing. And B, it allows you to get much, much, much closer to the shorebirds, because they don't perceive you as a threat. They know, they're extremely aware that you're there. But if you're slithering, quietly and slowly towards them, they'll look at you, but they won't necessarily. There's a set distance that different species will tolerate before they'll start to move away or show signs of anxiety. And obviously, you don't want to intrude on them to do that. But you can learn pretty quickly how close you can get to birds and other species, such as hooded plovers, who forage along a beach, back and forth along a beach. These are the little birds that, when you're walking along, they're the ones that sort of scatter in front of you on little wheels. They haven't got legs.
It looks like their legs
Yeah.
disappear because they go so fast.
That's right. But if you're slithering, and especially if you see some heading down the beach towards you and they're 100 meters away, you go flat on the ground. But you're set up there waiting for them with your long lens trained on them. They'll come right up to you, and they'll to within 7 or 8 meters. At which point, if you stood up, they would fly. They would scatter immediately. But if you don't stand up, they'll sort of look at you, and then at some point they'll do a runner past you, and then just keep going down the beach. And of course, you're trying to pan around as they're doing their runner, but it's always too late. But as they're approaching you, they will get really, really close, and then you can get a tiny bird, full in the frame. And the beauty of that is not only the pictures you can get, but you can see behaviors, like bird behaviors. They're sort of looking at you, and they're grinning at you, and they're laughing at you, and whatever. But you can see their interactions with each other and what they're doing in terms of feeding and so on. So it opens up this whole window, because we've got the long lens, the whole window into bird behaviors as well as bird shapes. And then if you're taking a blaze of photos, everyone will be different, because the birds are sort of constantly, and they're breathing, and they're inflating, and then collapsing, and then moving, and then digging into the sand. And that's fascinating stuff.
What's the kit you're using, Robbie? Using a trusty RF 100 or 500? What's
Yeah, no, I lashed out and actually ended up with a Canon 600
Nice.
prime.
Oh, that's a bit of a lash out.
It's worth more than my car. It's worth almost as much as I paid for my house 35 or 40 years ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But
How heavy is it?
it's kind of like the only lens you need then, is like, I mean, for that sort of work, it's kind of the trade-off. You could buy all these other different lenses, but you're just putting it all into the one.
Yeah, I mean, the risk is, like, it's not insured, because the insurance is a couple of $1,000s a year, and I can't cover that, and so I just look after it really, really, really as carefully as I possibly can. But it's always risk.
Is that a newer RF one or an older EF one?
So I've got the current one, the RF.
Oh,
it's a beautiful lens. Like, it's really, really, really classy.
wow.
And that's f4.
Sorry.
Is it an F4, that
F4 or
one?
Yeah,
F5.6?
yeah,
Yeah,
F4. Yeah, and of
yeah,
course you can put a tele extender on it as well,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then get a
Have
great.
you
That's
do you
actually
use
good with
the
the extender.
Uh,
do you use
oh,
extenders, Rob, or is
I
600?
use the 1.4. Like I've never actually used it too, and but just because everything I read that the quality really starts to drop off, and you lose another stop as well.
Yeah.
I've experienced that with the 2 times as well. I find a 1.4's it still takes a bit of an edge off. I think the better the lens, the more the extenders don't impact it. And yeah, I know like Sony's got a 300 2.8, and a lot of people use that with 1.4 quite happily. So yeah, so it no doubt do a very, very good job, and that's where you get the quality from, and that's where like sort of similar to astrophotography in a way, or other like some certain types of photography, you do just have to invest in a particular lens because it does open things up. And I find that if you're getting into a certain kind of photography, and birds is probably no exception, if you're starting off with a kit lens, not only do you have the learning curve of learning what you're doing, but then even I would struggle using that kind of equipment to make a decent shot, let alone someone just starting out. So it is a bit of
Yeah,
it's unfortunate that that's the way it works.
yeah, you
Uh,
can offset that to a degree, because the key thing about a long, high quality long lens like the 600 is that you can be some distance away and still get a usable shot. But if you've got a less expensive lens like again, Canon is what I'm familiar with. So the Canon 200 to 800, which sort of people are quite enthusiastic about. It's only a couple of $1,000. Not nothing, but far less than the other one. Um, if you're close enough, and even the 100 to 500 or an older generation EF lens, if you're close enough, you can get the same quality of result as with a more expensive, longer reach lens. So if you can work out ways with more patience, or slithering more silently, um, then you
that the
can save
technical
yourself
terms.
thousands of dollars.
I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah, in case
And
people are wondering, I think we're talking like $20,000 or something. I don't know for a
yeah,
lens like that.
that's right.
And then with that too, do you find that there is still then a certain distance where heat, haze, or something could impact the image quality in any case? Like always a distance where it doesn't matter what you do, the shot's not going to work out. It's not the lens's fault.
Yeah, heat shimmer is a killer. And I've photographed uh, last lapwings. There's some chicks which appeared down at Bangor on a spring, and it was sort of early spring, and so and the sun had come in, and all of a sudden, moist ground, moist vegetation, and then this warm early spring sun had come, and everything had just heated up really quickly, and even within 10 meters, the heat shimmer killed the shot.
Wow. Yeah.
So, obviously over long distances, it'll just totally destroy the clarity of your image. And so again, the solution to that is shooting early and late. You can have less for heat shimmer.
So, Rob,
And
from a technical point of view, what are you using inbuilt tracking, or how are you sort of getting the sharpness in your shots?
I usually, yeah, I mean, yeah, I latching
I
on
did.
to that
I,
mechanism
I
is really
track.
good, eye recognition, but also
Are
just to
you
spot.
using um the Mighty Mark twos or what
Yeah, and I got the Mark II,
yeah.
um, which I think has slightly
R5.
improved autofocus.
This,
And it
this,
is,
this is the Canon, by the way. Yeah.
yeah, it's also got, anyway, no, it wasn't a huge leap forward, and in some respects, it is noisier at high ISOs than
I've done the same, Rob, and I've been really
five.
disappointed with the amount of noise being introduced in a newer model.
Yeah,
It's a little bit like,
but it is, yeah, but it does have other advantages, and I think the autofocus is better, auto tracking, and also, like as we know, um, noise elimination software is just so good now. Like Lightroom itself is just
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant when you put a raw file in and put in that noise reduction or noise elimination on the raw file itself in Lightroom. It's just amazing how good the job it does. And then if more sharpening or whatever is required, um, you can use Topaz to fine tune it at the end as well.
yeah, you know, I got you can get away with that, but it's literally like 2 minutes a photograph to run it through the Lightroom noise. So
Well, it depends on your machine that you've got. You can, like, if you have a better
I got a $7,000 laptop, which is pretty high end, and it takes about 2 minutes. So it's
So
not.
what you can do also, Paul, and I just worked this out in the last couple of weeks, is that you can say you've got 100 pictures that you want to denoise or that potentially denoise. You can turn it on for all of them, and then walk away and do something else for a couple of hours. Come back, and that'll all be done. So
Yeah,
rather
that's how I've been doing it. But
yeah,
it is a couple of hours sometimes.
yeah. But that's fine. Go off and do something else and just do that denoise part of the processing. And well, not whilst you're sitting in front of the computer, which is obviously a huge
Definitely, like if you've got a desktop computer with a decent graphics card, there's a big win there. But normally, I'd say it's faster on the Mac for most things, but I've found definitely those sort of processing when it's just full on like that. You'd have to have like a Mac spec MacBook, I think, to really see that chew through those. Yeah, but it's so amazing to have it in there, and all of the new like culling stuff they've got now. And I don't know if you've tried that on any bird shots. I think it's more optimized towards people at the moment, and working out which ones are the best in focus and that kind of thing. But yeah, there's all sorts of new stuff coming out these days. I'm still hoping to get focus stacking in Lightroom. I'd like to see that, but
Yeah, me too.
yeah,
Should we have a look at some images and apply
yeah,
the conversation while we're looking at something other
yeah.
than
So just to
it?
finish off that, Luke, on to follow on. So I use Photo Mechanic to sort the images, and it's amazing.
Okay.
So you can throw, like I shoot in RAW, obviously, and I can throw thousands of images in, and then just scroll through them really quickly, and rate them, and then prune it down pretty smartly to get
mm,
the smaller number, much smaller number that you're actually going to look at.
People that don't know, I've done the same. That's a program that's specifically designed for super high speed turnaround culling in particular. So a lot of sports photographers would use it, or journalists. I actually use it even on wedding images. Like we did take 3 or 4 thousand images. It's nothing quicker. I found the latest versions of Lightroom on a new computer, just if you're in grid mode, not in develop mode, it goes slower, are getting quick enough that I don't mind using it for a medium sort of volume. But if you really want to do high volume fast, and I don't know if you're shooting in burst mode, Rob, or what you're doing there in terms of the volume of shots you're doing, but there's probably nothing quicker out there at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm shooting 20 frames a second. So yeah, it
Oh
does.
yeah,
yeah.
that's the fun of mechanic job. 20
Take
frames
some
a
pretty
second, Rob.
decent cards, I'd say. Yeah, it's amazing how much data you can generate in a very short period of time when you're shooting on those sort of
And
settings.
is that means you've got to be an electronic shutter for that, Rob, rather than mechanical? Yeah.
Yeah, and I've never had any issues. Like if you like, yes, the bird will change. Like if you're scrolling through, because it's electronic shutter, it does. The bird will slightly change shape, but it's
Yeah.
completely imperceptible.
Okay.
I think it's more if you're moving, isn't it? Like if you're doing a pan, then that could definitely cause
Yeah,
more distortion.
yeah,
But I think they're also getting closer to what the global shutter, where it's not necessarily as much getting to be much of an issue. I'll always try and go mechanical shutter where I can, but if you're doing like a time lapse or something like that, or certainly some frame rates you can only do with electronic, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
good
Canon
thing
had
that.
a ceiling of 12 frames a second at mechanical, even with the updated model. So if you want to go any faster, I think it can do 30, isn't it? The Mark
yeah.
II.
I think it can. I don't. Then yeah, it would have
Probably
to
have
be
to
pretty
drop the
extreme.
price.
Yeah,
You know, 20 is still a lot, mate, in
20's a
second.
lot. Yeah,
Far out.
and it's pretty amazing. Like
It's
you shoot in
really
bursts.
worth it though. I would imagine, Rob, that out of one sequence, there's always like you can then just pick the decisive moment, I suppose, where it's got the insect in its bill or whatever behavior you're kind of looking for.
Yeah, like anything, like they grimace or they look around or they do really quick movements, which might be even quicker than shutter speed. So yeah, it's but again, using your software, whether it's photo mechanic or something else, you can just very quickly hone down the selection to the ones and just keep refining and just end up with a much smaller number of usable images.
Mhm. And do you tend to do any culling in the field, or you like to do that at home just in case you miss something or?
Yeah, I've made mistakes in the field culling, so I tend not to. And it's also like on the back of a screen, you really can't tell, and sometimes you can be surprised by what you've caught. And it's only it may have what you perceive as clutter on the back of your camera, but in fact, it's not clutter. It's some really interesting phenomenon, another bird stepping through the background and grinning or something, whatever.
Rob,
So
can you get away with your regular SD cards, or are you leaning into the CF Express cards
I
to
use
give
CF Express
speed?
exclusively. Yep.
Yeah.
Simply because it's got a
Buffer.
much better buffering period, and also for downloading, like it's so quick. Um, yeah, but mainly so you can capture without buffering more images,
Are you using full RAW or C RAW?
full raw.
Yeah, so we're reading a lot. I'm just experimenting with C, which is a compressed RAW, and a lot of people
Yeah,
are saying they haven't noticed much difference between them. And
no,
it's
yeah,
half the file size. So in terms of what you're doing, I would have
yeah. And
thought.
I'm sure it'll be fine. But I don't like you don't hold your shutter down for like, you don't just hold it down, just keep it down. It's you're looking, like anything, you're anticipating the
Anticipation.
behavior of your subject, whether it's football or birds or people or whatever. And the more you are familiar with that subject, the more you can anticipate it accurately. And you just hold it down for a couple of seconds, and then, so you're doing bursts rather than straight through.
Do you have pre-capture in those ones with the like it
It,
can sort of take a few shots from before when you push the
yeah,
button?
it does. I haven't,
Yeah.
that's on the R5
Do
Mark II.
you leave it on?
I haven't actually used it because
Good.
obviously it's designed for if you're looking at a bird on a branch and you're waiting for it to jump off. So
Yeah, you've got
you can do
yeah.
that. Um, and I just haven't got around to using it. But people that do use it swear by it.
It is really good, but it doesn't help the image count very much.
Workflow. I think it only works with the CF Express cards. I don't think it works with the regular SD cards, is my understanding. I haven't got it switched on yet. Mine. I'm still learning my Mark II as well, Rob.
Yeah. So
Let's see. Let's see.
should we share the screen again?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
There it is.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Okay. So there's 40 images here. I'll scroll through them.
Are they
Uh,
all shot on the 600, Rob? That's my first question.
No, so they go back a few years. So I had a 500 before that. So the bird ones would all be, yeah, the 500 or the 600. On a
You,
couple
you
of
mean you
trips I've
mean
taken.
you mean the 100 to 500?
No, I had an F4 500 as well.
Oh, right.
And I sold that a couple of years ago to buy the six because I just rationalized that, well, for a 25% improvement in performance,
Oh,
it's probably
it's
worth
what
the
you're putting
extra.
that much time and effort into it. It's
Yeah,
like
that's right.
yeah, it's your
Right, it's the right tool for the job.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So these are one of my favorite species, the red knot, and you can see the red coloration on the chest, which is their breeding plumage. There's a couple of other species there, and not all birds color up, but this particular species, it's sort of it's a gorgeous squattish,
Rusty.
squattish. That's not Scottish. It looks, in terms of shape, it's a bit like a European blackbird, but it's a little bit bigger, and of course it's not, and it's got far more interesting coloration, and especially in its breeding plumage, that red color. It'll come up again. So these ones on the right, curlew sandpiper is critically endangered. All of these shots are at Robbins Island.
Mm.
And all of these ones are the migratory, long distance migratory species. There's your red knot again, showing that gorgeous red coloration. This would have been, just in the day or two before they departed, flying off to Siberia.
How do you find, if you go back one, Rob, how do you find the capacity for autofocus when they're flying straight at you?
Yeah, like it's very hit and miss, but if you if you're shooting at 20 frames a second and you do it multiple times, um, at some point you're going to get a few which are in focus.
Have you got it on, for a shot like that, have you got it on that broad setting, letting it choose what it wants, or are you literally doing more of a focus spot setting and trying to isolate it?
It would be a broad setting. I've certainly found broad settings and trying to pick up the eyes to be the most effective.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because also, like, it's fine if you've got a flock, but if you've got a smaller number of birds, it's very hard to locate them in the sky if you've got any sort of
Mm.
in small focus area.
Yeah, no, wide's very handy for that.
It's like it's sleeping.
Well, it's wind. Robbins Island is a windy place. No one's disputing that. And so this is a strong nor'easter. And this is this tiny redneck stint, the one that flies all the way to the moon in its lifetime. And it's closing its eyes against the sand and just happens to have that little bit of seaweed caught around its legs.
Do you
But
do that's an interesting question because obviously you're out in the same conditions and
yeah,
with some very expensive camera equipment. How do you mitigate sand? Because it's a pretty formidable environment for camera equipment being on the salty edge of a sandy patch like that.
yeah, it's very scary, exactly, because you get not only the wind and blowing the dry sand, but you get wind coming across water, and so it's salt bearing, and then across wet sand, and then onto you. Um, Through bitter experience, I now wrap my lens, particularly in like swathes of materials, like soft material, just in an effort to reduce the amount of sand that's coming in.
Yeah,
Is
because
that
it's
something you've just custom made yourself, Rob? Or
Yeah, it's just a scarf, basically. Just it's nothing fancy. It's just a scarf that just gets wrapped right around from the tip.
huh.
But at the same time, that scenario that I described, where you've got salt and sand laden wind, and you've got your lens pointing into that, this beautiful, front element of your $20,000 lens, and it becomes coated by salt encrusted sand. How do you get that off? It's
yeah, yeah, and
it's really tricky, and I think like the only way is to dribble fresh water on the front element of your lens, and because if you can't, take a cloth to it because you're going to grind the sand particles into your lens.
Are you using a
and
UV
what,
filter, Rob?
Sorry,
Are you using a UV filter?
I don't know. I'm not, and I don't know if they exist for that size of lens. Perhaps a good idea. I should look into it.
That's kind of why I was asking. Yeah, because it's what
well,
is
often like you're spending that much money to get that much image quality, and you're putting
Yeah,
like you couldn't buy a piece of glass good enough to not cause some sort of image. But I guess it's a trade-off with the image, the conditions, I suppose. I lost a lens on the edge of an active volcano once, and I kind of wish I had a UV filter on there, even if impacted the image quality a little bit. I
of
would
that
have
particular
made some of
shot.
those
Yeah,
trade-offs.
yeah. No, that's really true.
But
Yeah,
I don't use one myself, so it's just one of those, you know, photography is full of all those compromises, isn't it? And you got to work out
yeah.
where you.
I had to pay $500 to replace just the glass on the front of one of my lenses last year because I had the same feeling. I didn't want to reduce the quality of the shot, but I ended up paying a heavy price, a lot more than a UV filter. That's
Well,
for
I mean, to be honest, though, if you bought UV filters for all of your lenses, you probably would have spent $500. So, UV filters are just more like another insurance policy. But if you don't keep buying UVs, it might even out, even if you have to spend $1,000 to fix a lens here and there, if that makes sense.
sure.
So,
I've done
and
both
and
over
and
my
you've got
30
and you've
years.
got much better image quality because of that. So, there's probably like a more of a professional photographer's perspective rather than someone that doesn't use camera gear all the time. But I think that's probably a pretty valid way of looking at it too.
yeah. No, I think what you're raising is a really good point. So I'm going to look into it because it's definitely scary, like being in these conditions.
But like at the same time, like it makes these amazing shots. So
Yeah,
it's fun. Like it's always the more sketchy conditions for
yeah,
gear and things lead to this. So it's you gotta break eggs to make omelets, as they say.
yeah. You've got to break $20,000 lenses to make good shots. A lot of the birds have got,
Wow,
they're just gorgeous, gorgeous red-capped plover. It's a resident bird.
that's sort of
This
600,
is the
doesn't it?
bar-tailed godwit. This is the one that holds the world record for long-distance flight, 13,500 kilometers in 11 days.
What?
Alaska to St. Helens. Just this species, just amazing birds.
11? What the
And they
heck?
do that twice a year.
They must really like the food up there.
Yeah. This is sort of how the scene is. Like there, we've got a range of species on Robbins Island. We've got the red knots in the foreground with the red chests. We've got sandlings, also sort of out of focus there. In the back, you've got pied oyster catchers with the red beaks. Then you've got a bunch, or the ones with the long beaks are the bar-tailed godwits, and then you've got sort of short or slightly shorter beak or much shorter beaked grey plovers. All of them, apart from the oyster catchers, are the migratory species which will fly to and from the northern hemisphere each year. So that's just a tiny section, a tiny segment of a much larger flock.
So they generally interactivity is quite positive. They don't have any antagonistic kind of
No, they don't. They
behaviors
don't
going on.
fight and chase each other. Not at all. Like again, these sites where this phenomenon is happening, it's their roosting sites, so they're just waiting for the tide to drop before they can go back and, you know, exploit their respective ecological habitats or their different beaks.
So it tends
This
to
would be
be sort of low tide feeding and high tide resting sort of.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you get the high, obviously high, the tide varies in its extent. And when you get the king tides, when you get the really high tides, is when you get, all of the birds congregating on a very limited, literally 4 or 5 different sites around that whole ecoregion, which stretches from Woolnorth in the west all the way through to the Nut in the east. So that's probably 30, 40 kilometers of coast, and then 10 kilometers out to sea. So all of the roosting sites, all of the feeding sites in that whole basin, the Robbins Island / Bullinger Bay ecoregion, all of the birds there will congregate on these, 4 or 5 high tide roosting sites in the most extreme high tides. So you just get these massive agglomerations of birds.
Well, that photo before it looked like almost like soup. It was just
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it
gap
is.
for
Yeah,
air. I was like, how do they not like hit each other? It's
yeah.
like
I was
yeah.
going to say, yes, you go.
It's like the starlings, this incredible synchronized flight. And even though they're different species, like there's terns in there as well, so completely different species, they'll flock together. Just amazing.
it's a good message to humanity, a shot like that.
Cooperation. Yeah, it's a very
We can all get on together. Let's go.
multicultural society. There's our curlew sandpiper again, gorgeous, critically endangered species. This was just a single bird, and we were photographing it, and there were no other of its species around. And we felt that it may have missed the flight, might have missed the bus, but it was gone the next day. So I suspect it flew to try and catch up with its flock.
So they tend to all go together, yeah, rather than
Yes, they'll go in waves. Like not every bird goes on the same day, but there's a period, like the last week of March, first week of April, where there'll be successive waves of birds will come through this location and then just keep going on to Siberia.
well, if you go back one, just a technical question on terms of the aperture choices and shutter speed choices that you're using, and also I'm quite curious what sort of ISO you're comfortable leaning into as well, with that setup.
Yeah, you do what's needed, obviously. And because this bird was only like it had moved to within, let me think, probably 7 or 8, 9 meters of us. And so it's quite close. And so I'd stopped the aperture down to get a little bit more of the depth of field. Even there, looking at that image, like the eye is sharp and the beak is sharp, but the tail feathers aren't quite sharp. So
Yeah, that's kind of what I was asking.
it's fine. But,
Yeah.
that wasn't wide open. Like if that had been at F4, I would have had a sharp eye and probably half a sharp beak and then not a sharp leg, and the breast feathering would have
Yeah,
not
that's
been
kind of what I
sharp.
was asking. Like you've got to be quite selective with the
Yeah, you do, and you need to
stuff like
adjust.
that.
Like as your bird gets closer, you need to sort of stop it down a bit, a couple of stops even to get to F5.6 or 6, or F7 even, just to get um, more of the bird in focus, or else you just end up with a small portion of the bird in focus, which can be okay, but you generally want to see the whole bird sharp or reasonably sharp. Shutter
Do
speed,
you have
like
a kind of sweet spot you tend to start at?
um, the default is wide open because the lens performs at its best wide open.
Oh, it is best.
Um,
Yeah, right.
yeah, well, and it's certainly not degraded, and then you get that separation with your background. So if you've got F4, your background, whatever it is going to be, it'll go out of focus.
You're paying for it at the end of the day, isn't it? So you might as well use it if
Yeah,
you're gonna have.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shutter
Yeah.
speed, that would definitely be at least 1,000th of a second. That wind's blowing really fast. You can see the sand granules, little streaks. It can be 2,000 or even 1/3000th of a second. But of course, then it's a juggle. How high do you want your ISO to go?
Mm.
Uh, it's
Do you have a ceiling where you're like no higher?
not really. And again, in this situation, except at the very end of the very beginning of the day, the light levels, you're out in the open, you're on a beach, the light levels are high. So you can get away with, um, and your aperture's open. So you can get away with fast shutter speeds and still relatively low ISO. I can't remember what exactly that one was, but it wouldn't have been too extreme.
A
Yeah, I was
lot to
just curious with
consider.
that extra noise and that sensor and that camera, if you tend to limit the going the higher ISO or not.
Yeah, uh, not really. Again, just because it's a bright situation.
Be one of those scenarios where it's better to have a sharp, noisy image than a blurry,
Definitely.
not noisy one, I suppose, because you can just press the noise reduction button these days.
Yeah, that's right. And again, this one highlights like the photographer I was with and myself, we're lying flat on the ground. It was actually freezing. It's a southerly wind and it's getting towards the end of the day. And so we're just sort of sitting there getting colder and colder, but we right down low. And so you get this lovely, A, you don't frighten the birds away, and B, you get this lovely eye or even below eye level perspective.
Yeah, it's very low. Yeah.
Yeah, it almost looks like you're below my level.
Yeah, no, we hadn't dug a hole. So this is from the north of Robbins Island looking south. And again, you just get an indication of the sand flats. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, just they're very, very extensive. And at high tide, all of that sand is underwater, apart from, the obviously dry stuff at the bottom right.
You just must be thinking more aerials there, Paul, just looking at those nice
My tongue started to draw here. Um,
Yeah, so this is,
I'm about there for I've photographed the southern end of the island quite a bit, but not so much the northern end. So
yeah. Um, it's interesting because here, like, it looks quite a benign sort of seascape, but when the tide has been full and it's running out, or conversely, when it's a full, a big range of tides and it's running in, that channel in the foreground is like it's just tumultuous. You wouldn't want to put yourself or a boat anywhere near it because it's just ripping in and ripping out. And when you add wind to it, um, it's a very dynamic and pretty scary ocean environment. Best to be on land.
Rob, is there more translucence, like photographically, when it's going out as opposed to going in, like the tide, or do you wait for an ebb, or does it look unsettled, or is it normally looking pretty clear, the water? How does it?
Um, I mean, it's clean water, so you know, I mean, that's pretty low tide, obviously. So it's probably at the end. Like I can't see waves coming in, and it's a gentle wind. It's right on the point of sunrise. Low wind, low waves. So it's all just pretty settled. But that looks like at the end of low tide before it starts to come in again.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, 'cause there's some places in the world where it actually makes a really big difference to the coloration of the water, which direction the
Right.
tide's moving in. So.
Yeah.
Hmm,
It's a
interesting.
gorgeous. But the landscape itself is just completely gorgeous. It's surrounded by sand, and so the water is very blue, azure blue,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah, there's blues and greens and just
yeah.
every shade in between.
So this is
And
back
there's
to
been
our,
some warmth that comes through from
our
the
red knots
coloration
again.
of sand as well.
Oh,
And
Yeah,
red
yeah,
rocks as well, yeah. So
prowling through them.
it was interesting just looking at all the different shapes of the beaks back there.
Yeah, like again, look at all of those beaks from the very long, the bar-tailed godwits. There's one in the center background.
How long that is. It's just 3 times longer
Monstrous.
than its head.
Yeah, and then the shorter beaks of the red knots, and then there's also the grey plovers, those white, big-looking birds that look a bit like clowns. Very endearing little redneck plovers. That's a resident bird year round.
Very sort of compact body and a very short beak, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is the birds preparing to fly over the land. It's very contentious, and the proponent of the wind farm states categorically that the water birds and the shorebirds do not fly over land. Um, Whereas here, like I was watching, this is a bunch of redneck stints. Uh, as the high tide has ebbed, and they're all heading back to their foraging grounds on the other side of that land, and they just flew straight over it. I just watched them fly over it. Um, the question is, so this was on sort of the northern peninsula of the island. The question is, do they overfly the centre of the island where the main wind farm array is planned? And that's really the task ahead of us, because the wind farm has been approved, but it's subject to bird, particularly orange-bellied parrot, but also shorebird studies. And so the next 2 to 3 years will be designated for that study. And our job as people who are concerned about the bird life is to confirm that the methodology is sound and is properly executed, to see if the birds, where the birds exist and where they fly. And then just to watch that really closely, and we'll do the monitoring that we can ourselves, given the constraints of it's being a private island. So this is that same flock that we just saw just before they all took off. So they're still waiting for the high tide to drop. There's a couple of different species there, and they'll all just then take to the air. High elevation shot looking, that's a similar shot to the one we saw a minute ago. And looking up this gorgeous eastern beach, which is proposed for a 500-metre wharf to receive the wind farm components. So again, the wind farm, has impacts not only in terms of directly on the wildlife, but also in terms of the landscape, because this beautiful pristine beach would be marred by a major industrial wharf, and then a concreted road cutting left through that sensitive dune vegetation. And looking from the south, it's Robbins Passage at low tide.
Yeah, 180 degrees, Rob?
Yeah, it's obviously a stitched image, but it's pretty close to 180 degrees. And you can, at a tide like this, you can make your way across. But again, as the tide comes in and with the wind behind it, that just becomes a maelstrom, that passage. It's really, you don't want to be there in a boat on a windy day with the water up. And the water comes in really quickly. Yeah. But again, you can see the context of the island is just surrounded by mudflats, and under that mist at the left is all, it's another island off to the left, and all the way out to that other island that is, foraging ground for shorebirds and waterbirds. And the detail of the beautiful Robbins Passage.
Is that like a spring low tide, Rob, or is that like an average low tide? It looks pretty low.
Most low tides you can wade across or walk across, and you'll get, maybe wet up to your ankles, up to your knees. But most low tides you can traverse Robbins Passage. And then the islands, there's a cluster of islands which are public land off the southwest corner of Robbins Island, and you can just walk across from the mainland of Tasmania across to the Wallaby Islands. And that's completely legal, and it's public land, and there's shorebirds on those islands as well. So
you do want to be pretty careful though if you get caught with the tides the wrong way and
definitely
be washed out to King Island.
That's right.
I don't know if I'd be game to try that, mate.
Yeah, it is a bit daunting, but if you are aware of when the tides are and you pick your way across on the correct passage, it's not as daunting as it seems at the outset.
Would it just suck your boots off? Or are you pretty?
It's not too bad, yeah. Like, I haven't encountered quicksand. That's always a worry, but I haven't encountered it anywhere, and it's not really regarded as an issue around there for some reason. I've certainly encountered quicksand on the Takina coast.
Yeah, me too.
And that, looking back, there was one instance particularly which was extremely scary to look back on. Like, the ground just sort of quivers below you, and you leap off, and it's still sitting there quivering, and then it just turns into water.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the West Coast for you. So what do we got here, Rob? Which species is this?
Just trying to, it always slips my mind. God, it's such a, I'll remember it in a second, but I can't remember it now. Anyway, I'll move on and I'll come back to it. So this is
Oh, look at
You
that.
know, a couple of thousand birds in flight. There was more behind on the sandbars. Uh, this is again birds leaving their high tide roost, heading back to the low tide. Plus a really nice left-hander.
I was going to say, that looks like a surfable wave there, Rob. Come on.
It's not as big as it looks, unfortunately. It's only about 2 feet tall, but very nice shape. This one's the ruddy turnstone. That's what it is.
I was going to say that.
Quite a name, isn't it? But I get ruddy kind of suits the color palette.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
reflection.
A lot of birds are named as descriptors. You know, the coloration, or I don't know where turnstone comes from, but the bar-tailed godwit, for instance, that extraordinary 13,500 kilometre one, um, is godwit is an old English word for good bird. Unfortunately, it was in all likelihood referring to its culinary potential, but I just prefer to think of it as, you know, a good bird in relation
Like
to
the southern right whale or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, it was the right whale to kill, you know. So this is the godwit is the good bird to get for your pot, to have for lunch. But you know, setting that aside, it's a very good bird in terms of its migratory capacity. So also on the island, apart from the shorebirds, are the blue-winged parrots and the orange-bellied parrots. This is the blue-winged parrot. The two species, like there's only 3 migratory parrots globally, and they all occur here in Tassie. You've got the swift parrot, the blue-winged parrot shown here, and the orange-bellied parrot, which is the same genus as this blue-winged parrot. And the two species flock together. And they're quite hard to distinguish unless you can see the tummy, and also the green on the back. The green on the orange-bellied parrot on the back is a lot is brighter than the relatively buff green of the blue-winged parrot. But the two have got the same habitat requirements, and they flock together and they migrate together. So, in a sense, the blue-winged parrot is regarded as a proxy for the orange-bellied parrot. So, where you get blue wings, you're going to get orange-bellieds almost certainly also. And the
I saw
blue
one
wing parrot,
Gold Coast once and thought it was an orange bellied, and I reported it to the OBP program and thinking I was a hero. And they go, "Oh no, that's the blue wing." It's like, oh, I'll stick to landscapes.
no, it's still good to, because even the blue wing, like that is now, that was listed early this year as vulnerable. So that's, you know,
Okay.
all
Yeah.
3 of the migratory species are in decline, and all listed species. It's just the you know, the orange-bellied parrot, the OBP has obviously had, it's been critically endangered for so long, and it's had so much conservation funding and attention and research, that it is plainly given higher priority just because of that investment in it as a species.
And that's an example, Rob, where if you go back, like that separation that you don't get, or is much harder to get when you've got, you know, physical structures in and around this
Yeah,
subject matter.
yeah, you get this messy, and again, you got those stalks of grass in front of the bird, which you don't get on the beach. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah,
Whereas the next shot's just clean as a whistle.
yeah. So they're all fairy terns, which are also threatened species. And Robbins Island is one of the strongholds for breeding for that species. So it is just a, like it's a resident species. I think it does. Some individuals do migrate to and from Victoria, but it's sort of, there's a resident population which stays year round. And then you've got your raptors, white-bellied seagulls, and wedge-tailed eagles shown here. So that one's taken with the 100 to 500 lens. Virtually every day that I've spent on Robbins Island, I've been stalked by eagles, whether white-bellied or sea eagles or the wedgies. It's got a very healthy population of eagles, again, which is a concern in relation to the wind farm.
So they're,
Got a
normally,
G.
they're both normally in pairs, aren't they, Rob?
Say it again.
They're both normally in pairs, seagulls and the wedge-tails.
Uh, Not infrequently, not always, though. I think this one is by itself. And there is an outline of the island in purple. And then there's a 500-metre buffer around all of the coast. And then parts of that eastern right-hand side wouldn't be have wind farm, wouldn't have the wind farm array on it, but you can see that um, it is a comprehensive array across the main part of the island, and so any those the roosting sites for the high water, high tide roosting for the shorebirds. There's a couple on the west coast. There's a couple on an island off to the west of Robbins Island, and then there's more off to the east of Robbins Island. So, if you draw direct lines between the 5 roosting sites in this vicinity, they crisscross the island. So, still to be like certainly heaps of anecdotal evidence that birds fly, to and fro across the island. The proponent of the wind farm says that they categorically don't. So we've got the next 2 to 3 years to determine that, um, one way or the other, without question.
I had no idea of the scale. That's a lot of windmills.
Yeah, it's 100 turbines, and as I said, like they're not small, they're big. Like they're 3 times the height. The turbine blade goes to 3 times the height of West Point. It is the industrialization of this island, with all the roading that's required, the causeway bridge at the bottom end, that purple line going across to the mainland of Tasmania. So it would fundamentally change the character of the island. And that's it that I've got. So I'll stop sharing.
So Rob, where have you sort of used your imagery so far, and where else would you like to purpose it in terms of the advocacy for that whole conversation that's going on?
Well, of course, it's all been designed for a show which is run by Luke Sharkey and Paul Coleman. So I've spent the last 5 years working towards this show, and so there we go. It's all over.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's just any and everywhere, wherever you can get it out. Like it's been used. Bob Brown Foundation's used it. Different media stories have used it. It's, I think, particularly with Robbins Island, because it's a privately owned island. It's off the northwest coast of Tasmania. When I envisaged it before I ever went there, I sort of had a vision of a paddock, a large paddock with big beef cows running over it. And it's not that at all. Like a portion of it has been it's been cleared for beef running in the centre and the southern part of the island, but the island itself is so much more than that. And so I think the main value of the imagery, both the aerial drone stuff and then also the shorebirds, is just to show that this is an amazing island and it's got amazing wildlife, and that's really, really important. And the prime comment from showing these images is, "Oh, I had no idea that's what it was like." And so that's that's photography.
It also has a very rich Indigenous history too, Rob, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it was exactly because of its, and for a few years I was going there and I'd heard like Craig Garland speaks of how important it is as a wildlife, as an Aboriginal meeting place, prior to 200 years ago. And I hadn't quite twigged as to why that might be, because it's flat, it's got limited water, and then it occurred to me that it's because of the wildlife. Like if we've got 25,000 birds there at certain times of the year now, in a population which is, in a small fraction of what it used to be, there would have been 250,000 birds there through the summer, every year. And again, like the bogong moths at Kosciuszko, that's just a magnet for Aboriginal people to go and feast on those birds, or on those moths, which is what they did in both cases. And so that's why it's such an important area. And it's precisely 200 years ago that the Van Diemen's Land Company applied for a land grant in northwest Tasmania, and I think they applied for 500,000 hectares, so given 300,000 hectares. So it's a huge swathe of northwest Tasmania, including Robbins Island. And tragically, within 10 years of that land being granted, all of the Aboriginal people that used to meet there, that used to move around that space, were gone. There are well-documented massacres at Marrowa and other places, and then the remainder, many Aboriginal people would have died through disease, and many were shipped off to the Furneaux group of islands. So 10 years to eliminate that 50,000 years or 45,000 years of Aboriginal occupation, of Aboriginal life on that place. It really brought home to me, uh, the phrase, we live on stolen land. This is just seeing the landscape, hearing that, and it's also recent, 200 years, that's not very long ago. I'm almost 70, so it's only, my life plus two other lives. And we're back to that time. It's very recent, a very recent history. And, how much has changed in that time.
Yeah, take a deep breath after that. But well, that's a real commitment, Rob. You've shown to those beautiful birds and that species and that whole concept. And I mean, when I first saw the conversations coming up about it, there's that whole other conversation about how do we. Yeah, it almost seems like anti-intuitive to go against a green energy project, and I think it confused a lot of people initially because it wasn't presented in the context of how special a breeding place this is in particular to some very very special creatures, and very few people, if any, would be aware of the Indigenous history of the place as well, which would
Yeah.
obviously be significantly impacted by the
Mm.
erodings and everything else as well.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
I went to your
yeah,
opening, Rob, which was pretty amazing. So Rob had an exhibition opening down here at Wild Island, and oh my God, the speaker array you had was incredible, Rob. Like
yeah, yeah,
I was there
no,
an hour and a half, and it was still going. I had to run, and I
yeah,
just thought, geez, you've really really pulled a lot of people together with a lot of different skill sets and knowledge bases and cultural and scientific knowledge. So as you were saying about pulling together people with high skill sets, you're obviously not just out here on your own, but you're using your tool set in conjunction with their sort of scientific knowledge and cultural sort of context to tell a story and in a broader context.
yeah. And it is like the science of the place is obviously really, really, really important, and it's been surveyed and studied for decades. So there's a long history of study. Even though it's under private ownership, the landowner has allowed bird watchers to come on to the land and look at the shorebirds. In recent years, that access has been curtailed. And it's also harking back to the Indigenous heritage. I think it's a great pity that Aboriginal people are barred from that land, given the extraordinary history of disenfranchising from that landscape, how important it was before and how recent it was. Um, but yeah, there is a lot of, coming back to the ecology, there's a lot of good ecology known, but there's still gaps. And there's what's happening in terms of scientific research is that technology is improving all the time, as with photographic gear. And so we've now got these little recorders, about as big as your phone or smaller than your phone, bioacoustic recorders where you can place them in a landscape with the batteries will last 3 weeks, and they'll pick up orange-bellied parrots or any bird that is close to the ground or on the ground and calling, or masked owls, things like that. And we're now developing the call recognition software. So rather than have to listen to 2 weeks of recordings, you can just fling it into this software and it'll get the audio signature and pick that up, and then you can double check that you've got the right species. And so we've now got the capacity to deploy these bioacoustic recorders, get all the recordings, and see where the birds, if or where and when they're there. And so for orange-bellied parrots, for instance, the obvious thing to be done now is to deploy that right around the coast in any of the habitat that the birds might frequent, and just pick them up, do that over a period of a few months, over 2 or 3 years, and you'll have a very accurate picture of where the orange-bellied parrots are extending to on the island. Like, we know they track up the west coast. They have been seen on the paddock areas in the middle of the island. So we need to, determine the extent of how much they traverse the island, how long they're there for, etc. We can do
It'd
that.
be a hell of a job going through 3 weeks of recordings to listen. So it's good that
Yeah, it wouldn't be much fun. But
Geez, that's
again,
clever.
because and again for the orange-bellied parrot call signature, that's only been developed in the last couple of months, so it's all really cutting-edge stuff.
Wow, okay.
But we have that capacity now, and we, absolutely obviously need to utilize it in the surveying.
That's incredible. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, What a amazing, inspiring presentation, Rob. Thanks so much for sharing your passion and also just you know your concern for the environment and showing us what's out there and what special species are there and the risks that are out there as well. And yeah, just want to thank you for all of the work that you're doing for the environment and inspiring folks like us that might be a little bit more restricted in what we can do. And
I'm just
but
sitting
we
here
can.
looking at Paul's. You've had a big grin on your face the whole show, Paul. I think you're just imagining yourself slithering across the sand photographing
I'm
shorebirds.
not, I'm not saying anything, mate. I am keen to get back up there in the air though, and do that justice. It's as you know, my personal artistic motivations lend magnificently well to that environment. I haven't been up there for a while. I don't think I'm going to be game enough to be trudging around and getting sucked off, get my feet sucked off anywhere anytime soon, Rob. But I think yeah, it's from what little. I mean, I have passed on imagery I've done from the air to Grant and people in the past that have asked just from before, just to get a sense of the broader landscape and just the beauty of the place. Like beauty is obviously still at the forefront of one of the tools that we have for connecting people with place and building connection and fostering emotional connection with places, which is the very thing that usually advocates action happening. And so I guess as a role of photographers, it's sort of, where you're probably a little bit further down the more pointy edge of that ecological front line. I like using my artistic approach, I guess, to foster relationship and connection with things and places. But I'm also getting more and more aware of the choice we have about using challenge and education through the role of our imagery and video as well, which you've done really beautiful in that film in particular, Rob. It's
Mm.
very unassuming, it's very accessible, it's very clearly written, and yet it's also quite emotively engaging at the same time. And it's not sort of pointing fingers, it's just stating facts. And I think that makes that conversation very accessible to everyone. And I think it's a really nice line to take. And yeah, I've been wanting to have a chat about this on the show for a while, and thanks for taking the time. I don't know many people busier than you, you Rob, for
Not
trying
always,
to
not
pin
always.
down to anything. So that's a bit of a treat.
I think things keeps me busy now. I've got this burgeoning giant vegetable garden, and it's just
Oh,
if you look away,
Must be
it gets out of
exploding.
hand. So
we created a monster.
I created a monster. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen it for a while, Rob. I have to come and have a look. And I know Rob's been quite generous with the bounty of that garden over the years too.
the
So
trouble is you can't see it anymore. It's just got
not sky high.
asparagus, like that, and asparagus that thick, and it's just
Wow.
things you have to deal with.
Oh.
But yeah, that aside, thank you both for hosting the show. I think it's really like it's had a little bit of a pause, but it's an amazing commitment that you've had for a long time.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
5 years, I think. Yeah.
Continue.
So yeah, it's still here, folks. We haven't died and gone to heaven yet. But it's really nice to have a platform for people like yourself, Rob, that are doing really meaningful, purposeful work beyond, just what a lot of us are doing, which is just enjoying the process and creating beautiful images. It's like, I'd sort of get us all just sort of thinking a little bit further. It's not only sort of pushing yourself into a different sort of sphere or skill set, like I've just started doing a little bit more wildlife stuff for the last few years, and I just got the same camera as Rob, partly for that reason. And so why not apply that to something locally that actually has purpose and meaning beyond, just the beauty alone, and maybe it can be surprising what small little contributions can help and create ripple effects, because some of the people doing that sort of work are scientists, but they're not necessarily photographers, and you team up together, it can be a beautiful uh, you know, what are they called? Greater than the sum of the parts sort of scenario. We're coming together. So, and again, beautiful exhibition, Rob. That was really astonishing, and I can't tell you how much I learned from the speakers that you pulled together as well. And particularly, I was very unaware of the Indigenous history, and when we opened the exhibition with that part of the storytelling, it was really moving and really beautiful. And just a reminder, like that's written into landscape everywhere, and it's quite present to me because that's literally the ethics and ethos of the show that Luke and I are opening on Friday night. Is the kind of lost and unspoken story of but what is still actually a rich and living Indigenous relationship with a lot of the places in Tasmania. And I don't think that's as acknowledged or as aware as it could be. And it's a real privilege to, as some blowing white fella, to advocate and be a part of that story and help create platforms of connection and education and understanding that we can do through this medium. So see you there Friday night, Rob, 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Rob. And
Thank you
with
both.
that, we'll call it a night. And do check out Rob's work on his website. And where else can they find your work? Rob, website's the best place to go.
Website, and also that video is on Vimeo, the video platform called Vimeo. So I've got that plus various other ones.
We'll
Probably
put
a higher quality version than you would have seen on your screen coming through this show. So
fantastic. We'll have those links in the show notes below. And good evening, everyone. Catch you later. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Cheers, Rob.
Good
thank you
night.
both. Yep.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I'm doing now.
Maybe it's your hard drive space thing.
All good now. So it's recording. So, 3, 2,